Welcome, everyone, and Happy New Year. We'll go around the room here and introduce ourselves, and then if anyone has any announcements, we'll take those. I just want to, let's do that. So I'm Donald Wardlaw, and I'm an architect in Oakland.
I'm Rachel Slonicki, and I'm an architect in Berkeley.
I'm Kerstin Hellman, and I'm an architect in Oakland.
My name is Jim. I'm a structural engineer. I started my firm middle last year, so I just bought this event and come to see it.
Hello, my name is Hannah Walrath. I'm a first-year master's student in architecture at UC Berkeley. That's right. Okay. Thanks. I'm Ari. I use they, them pronouns. I'm a freelance designer in Oakland.
I'm Sharon, a landscape architect in Oakland.
Hi, Steve Tucker, architect, landscape architect, Oakland.
Ines, I'm an architect in Oakland.
Mercedes Corbell, I'm an architect in Oakland with Studio Saha, and just moved into a new office in December on MacArthur in West Oakland, and loving it. So glad to be not working at home anymore. Yeah.
And we'll take some announcements if anyone has any. I'll just make a couple of quick ones. The next small firm forum in February, the topic will be lighting, and we'll be having a representative of a lighting company with a lot of information in his brain talk about it. The second thing is that you may know, starting in 2025, we're going back to the old system of in-person making a small contribution as a thank you to the AIA. So the way that has to be done is you have to do it online. Go to the small firm forum page at AIA East Bay and hit the registration button, and then it takes it. They don't want to really deal with cash here. Anyway, so that's that.
I do it just with the invite that comes, right? That's how I did it. I didn't have to separately go to the website.
Okay, so the email invite also takes care of it. That takes you to the registration page. Any other announcements?
Well, we could announce that our next meeting is going to be on lighting. Oh, I didn't hear you. Sorry, I'm nervous. My bad. Okay.
Also, one more thing. The March meeting, Mercedes, you may know a little bit more about this, is going to be a roundtable discussion, correct, on contracts.
I'm not involved with the March meeting, but
I know, but you sent around the
the list,
spreadsheet, and that's what the topic was.
I didn't memorize it, but okay.
So the roundtable discussions is a traditional format at the small firm forum, and it's really amazing how much everybody adds to the discussion by sharing their own experiences. So we're going to try that in March. Rachel, go ahead.
All right. So my name is Rachel Slonicki, and I have a little company here in Berkeley, Little Elephant Architecture, and I'm very honored to talk today, although I was a reluctant speaker, I have to say, because I'm not used to public speaking, so thank you. Sydney, next slide. I don't know, should I stand up, or is it better to, if I'm, oh, okay. So I'm going to talk about an accessory dwelling unit that I did in Oakland. Next slide. One of the challenges of this project was, you can see the very tall tree in the distance. I guess part of it's obscured by our video from afar. But the tree, we worked with the arborist, and the tree dictated part of the design in the sense that you couldn't build within a certain diameter of the actual tree trunk. We had an arborist come out and assess the health of the tree, and the owner had to aerate the ground and do a whole bunch of stuff. And so you can see the ADU, the L wrapping around the tree on the upper left slide. And the other thing about it was that there was no digging allowed without the arborist present, and it had to be hand digging and it also had to be, I believe, don't quote me on this, but I think it had to be, also affected the construction schedule. It had to be in the winter so that the tree was more dormant. And the structural engineer designed a pier and grade beam system, which is very unusual for a small building of this size, but the idea being that it would be a nimble, flexible foundation in case they stumbled on a major root of the tree during construction, that they could move the pier laterally to not affect the roots of the tree. So I believe it's a deodar or redwood, I'm not sure, I can't remember. Maybe Sheila knows, or Shannon knows. I don't know, I don't remember. But it's one of the protected trees in Oakland, so. It's the magnitude because of the size of the trunk. You know, they have it at DBH diameter at breast height or some such language. So the next slide. So the site you see in the lower right was really hampered by surrounding accessory structures to the rear, to the west, if north is up on the page. And really the only unobstructed views were to the east, looking across all the neighbors' yards. So that's the upper, I would use the pointer, but it doesn't show. The upper left shows the view, you know, creating the public space oriented to that view across the yards. And there was an existing, the red, I'm just trying to show Revit a little bit because I know a lot of people here don't necessarily use it, but some of the power of Revit, I'm just trying to show that you can show what you're demolishing. So we were removing an existing garage and chicken coop. And the owner had an in-law that lived in Australia. So part of the reason of this ADU was for them to be able to come for an extended time and visit in their own space, but then also when they weren't there, to be able to rent it out. And in Oakland, as I'm sure many of you know, it can't be Airbnb. It has to be like a longer term rental than a month. So next slide. So the existing house, I just did this dark so it's hard to see, but I guess you can't see it all. It has a series of arches because of the glare, but it's a Spanish style single-family residence. If you go to the next slide, we tried to incorporate some of those motifs in the windows, the arched windows, but also in the front porch, a little bow in the balcony. Next slide. So the floor plan was also dictated by going around that tree, but also trying to put all the utilities, especially wet utilities, towards the building, also to minimize digging and trenching. And one of the things that, you know, I work with, we'll see it at the end of the slide presentation, but I volunteer with ACE, which is a national program for introducing high school students to architecture, construction, and engineering. And one year, I think it was during COVID, we did a design project, which was to do an ADU. And I was showing this floor plan, and they mentioned the adjacencies of the bedroom not being close to the bathroom and the closet/dressing room. But it was more dictated by staying away from the tree and also minimizing the trenching. So next slide, and that's just a view on the interior. So we keep going. Some of the challenges with the design of a small accessory structure, and at the time it was new for an ADU to be able to be built, and now our energy code has changed in terms of what we have to do as the quote unquote standard, but it's very hard to get a small building to pass Title 24. And so it was really a challenge working with the energy consultant to, you know, we had the rigid outboard, we had 2x6 framing, we had to minimize the amount of fenestration, but we barely passed. So I guess the explanation for that is that they're assuming that you have a certain footprint and a certain volume, and that volume would have a certain amount of fenestration as the standard at which they're comparing you to. But when you do a really small structure, it's really hard to get it to pass. At least in this case, this was a different code than we have now. But we did add a heat pump, which the owner said, I mean, it's amazing. He said that whether it's cold or hot, the thing adjusts to the temperature in the building in no time, which I was really surprised because there's really only one register that's working for the whole building. Anyway, so next, yes.
Do you have a forced airport? You mentioned registers, so what was that?
Just the cassette.
Oh, the cassette.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
just the, it was a wall cassette, yeah. So I'm just showing this because, you know, accessory dwelling units are the wild, wild west, really, as a project type. And Rebecca Schneer is just mentioning too that there's a new law that just came into effect in January that now you can build 8 ADUs on your site. So she might have,
And my understanding of it is that it forces local governments to adjust their zoning to allow people to have up to 4 units inside an existing dwelling.
yeah, wow, oh, a JDU. So this project is in San Francisco, pretty close to the ocean. And I'm just showing that at the time, the city of San Francisco, it's now changed because last January, all zoning changed radically, but you had a choice if you were doing an ADU. First of all, you could do it within the structure or detached. In this case is an attached structure. The local guidelines is the upper right image. So basically, by the local planning laws, they could only add 8 feet into their rear yard in order to try and make, for the owners who wanted to create an ADU where she could either move downstairs and her kids could live upstairs, or she could have a caretaker living downstairs and come upstairs to live with them. So by the state mandates, and that's the option that she chose, is the lower right image. So she could basically build out almost her entire rear yard in order to get a livable unit down at the lower level, which is pretty big difference. And also in terms of, I mean, the planning process, you know, if you will go with the state mandates, you are more streamlined in terms of the planning process. If you go with the local guidelines, there's all these hurdles that you have to go over with neighbors and all these other things. So I'm not sure at this point why anybody would choose local guidelines. I'm sure there's a reason. And then there's a hybrid option, but we didn't explore that option. So that's just, again, the Revit model. This project was submitted for permit, and then the owner decided to put it on hold because of costs. So, you know, during COVID, we had all that shortage of materials, and it really escalated prices radically. So
What was the expected cost then?
for this, I think it was around 400,000, which is, you know,
It's pretty insane for a little bedroom and a living room.
yeah, no, it affects what you want to do. Like, do you really want to do it, you know? So next, yes.
Sorry, quick question. Were there any challenges around open space, like doing the state mandate that's done in open space requirements?
I don't remember the open space, but I think we were fine. Because she was a corner lot. You can't tell that here, but that is a corner lot. And I was thinking in the middle of the night because I couldn't sleep because I was so nervous. But the other thing about this is in San Francisco, if you build an ADU, you need to put in, and she has a corner lot, so you have to have a tree every so feet. So she had a lot of trees already. But in terms of street trees, you know, you never know when you're, you know, for those that are in school, you never know what you're going to discover as an architect, even though you may have learned a lot. There's always something you didn't know. So in this case, you can't put a tree where there's, you know, it's a corner, so it's near it's a bus stop. You can't put a tree here, there, and everywhere. So in the end, even though she had to put in like, let's say 8 trees and she had 6, never expected to be out pounding the pavement and trying to figure out where a street tree could go. Yes. No, that that did change, and also she literally is next to a bus stop. So there's an exception for when you're close to transit. And ironically, you know, there's the other weird thing about things with ADUs is they don't consider them really additions, which is another kind of weird concept. Anyway, so next slide. So these, again, are just using Revit, showing the existing building had this little stucco reveal that we tried to incorporate into the building. And, you know, I heard an architect talk many, many years ago about the importance of having the semi-private space and the porch. So to try and integrate the addition, the ADU with the main building, you know, we added a very narrow porch because that's all we could do, but also added a little ramp because this is for, if she had to move downstairs, you know, aging in place, you know, to be able to be accessible and use the unit. So next slide. These are just some interior views, again, with Revit. And the other thing about San Francisco is you have to have a full-size kitchen in your ADU. So that 8-foot scheme would never have allowed us to put a full-size kitchen in the unit. You know, you can't do like a little, you know, kitchen you'd find in a very small, you know, like rental unit. You have to have a full-size kitchen, and they even specify, you know, the refrigerator has to be so many cubic feet and all that stuff. So anyway, these are just some interior views. I know we have another Revit person here, and I've asked him before. It's hard for me to control. I still haven't controlled the lighting and how you look at it. But anyway, next slide. So in the wild, wild west of accessory dwelling units, the other rule that came into effect many years ago is that you can, if you owned a multifamily residential building and you like one of the projects I'm showing you has 26 units in it, no, 24 units. So 25% of it, if you go to the next slide, 25% of the units can be you could add that many ADUs. So in that case, they're allowed to add 6 ADUs in the interior space, and it could be the garages. So back to the parking issue, which I don't actually agree with, and we have multiple projects that we're working on this. This is with working with George Chavon, he was my ex-business partner, but he, you know, we are working on multiple buildings where you're taking over the parking garages in a building, like the quote-unquote soft story, and putting in ADUs. So this particular project is a new project that I have we've been working on for about a year. The owner lives in it, has a duplex in San Francisco. She's also an artist, and she has a garage in her backyard that is literally completely, has water intrusion issues. And it's her office and studio, and she wants to age in place in the upper unit of her duplex. So next slide. So here on the lower right, you can see the ADU that we're adding, which has the higher ceiling heights because her art is quite big. And the planners in San Francisco said that the simplest thing to build a studio for her was to build an ADU, even though they know that it isn't her intended use for it, but for her to have an ADU for her artist's studio. And then we're adding, it's hard to see here, I guess I should walk over here because I can't point it out with the pointer because it doesn't work, but we're adding this is the elevator, and then here is the office for her on the upper level, which is across the parking. Like it would create a carport. Oh, sorry. Create a carport over the driveway. Oh, sorry. Here you go.
Oh, that's interesting. So that's why there's a space for the cars to come from the street all the way to the back?
Yes.
Was that because they wanted to use that for parking delivery, or the city required it, or?
No, it's an existing driveway, but she doesn't use it for that at all. So that's why we were able to expand into the side yard. She'd worked with a previous architect before, but they were always adding to the rear of the building, and it was taking over the decks. So in this case, expanding to the side yard, she was able to do that. Anyway, next slide. So this is the project I was talking about where we're taking over the parking garages and doing site improvements and utility upgrades. And this is, if you go to the next slide, a project in Berkeley where we're basically, the whole lower level, except for the 2 units in the front, is a huge parking garage, and we're adding 6 ADUs in the parking garage and then doing a full utility upgrade of the entire site. I mean, like we just, like in the last month or so, we were trying to go all electric, actually, like take all the gas out of the building. But for some reasons, we ended up having to keep 2 gas water heaters in the penthouse on the upper level. And then we've been working with the landscape architect to develop the courtyard as a place for students to study. And then the fencing that you see is hiding courtyards that are being added. So there's a whole new mechanical, electrical, we're adding heat pumps throughout the building, whole new electrical, whole new fire service. I mean, it's just a major renovation. So when I work with George, he's really he's the architect of record and the designer, but I am doing the work coordinating with all the consultants, which is, and with the city. So anyway, so next slide. So I mostly work with existing buildings, as I said in the bio for the project. So additions, repairs, remodels, and adaptive reuse. So if we go to the next slide. This was a project in Oakland, which was the tiniest house. I think it's as tiny as my apartment, where the owners wanted to add a master bedroom addition. And that's what you see in the rear yard there. And you'll go to the next slide. And what was their existing master bedroom became like a family room and a flexible space so that they could either use it as a family room or, for example, their nephew came to stay. And one of the arguments I had with them, which is something which they changed their mind about, is I feel pretty strongly that when you can, for example, put in a 3-foot door throughout, it's really important, rather than putting in a skinnier door. And, something really tiny like that can make a really big difference. So at one point, one of their moms was an avid bicyclist, and she fell off her bike, and she had to get around. And then that's when they changed their mind about that simple little change. But it makes a big change for, potentially aging in place. And then opening up the dining room to the rear yard, you can see how much more light is in the space than was there before, and adding skylights, reflecting off the wall to give more light from above. Next slide. This is kind of an unusual project that I did, a contractor that I really like to work with. His family owns this basically trailer park up in Truckee. And I never knew those things were so amazing, actually, going inside them. But you don't deal with the local jurisdiction when you're dealing with a prefab structure, which I didn't know. You actually are dealing with the state of California. And whenever you do, like this case, we're adding a covered porch so they can get out of the building in case of heavy snow. There's also a deck being added. And it cannot attach to the prefab. It has to be its own freestanding structure, independent. So the structural engineer came up with this sort of free span design to try and give them the most clear space on the deck. So anyway, next slide. This is a project here in Berkeley where the owner on the north side of the building, there's like a 2-foot side yard. So you're dealing with an existing non-conforming setback. And also lot coverage in this case was really one of the challenges for the project. So if you go to the next slide, she wanted to add a master bedroom addition and develop the deck so that it was more oriented to the rear yard, and then eventually create an ADU in the garage. So she wanted to have the deck be more covered, but because of lot coverage issues, that was the extent of the coverage on the deck that was allowed. So next slide. This is a repair project. It's in San Rafael, and it was one of my first projects that I actually switched to Revit and worked with Carlene Gallone, who she actually taught me Revit, and then it was really I'm just showing this because it's kind of hard to take the plunge to change the software that you use to do your drawings. Like, do you really want to make that change, like to go from CAD to using Revit? And I'm really glad I did. But the challenges with this project were, there's some things in Revit that are, I find very difficult. I don't know if you agree, but stairs, railings, cabinetry, and topography are some of them. So for a first project in Revit, this was kind of a challenge to do.
What about details, when you want to show, how walls and things, materials go together? Can you do that?
You can blow up a particular area and then draw over it, or you can link details. You can draw with, they have a detail library, so you can draw using their tools, but you can also zero in on a particular area of the building and then fill in the information. So one of the surprises with this project was that the contractor had just started initially repairing dry rot. And then the more, it was like, unforeseen circumstances, the thing just snowballed until it got to a point where he had to go get a permit it wasn't really, now it was a new deck, basically, because there was so much dry rot with the deck, and this was this really steep uphill slope. And we had to do major retaining walls, and it was, you think it's just quote unquote a deck project, but it ended up being really intricate project. So next slide. This is a project I did here in Berkeley. It's one of my first projects when I went out on my own, which is the repair of a building that was burned by arson here in Berkeley. Luckily, the fire department was like very close by dealing with another building that was burning by arson, so they were able to save the building. The thing about this building was, first of all, the structural engineer said it was the worst building he had ever seen in his entire career in terms of the way it was constructed. And then the contractor, when they came to build, it was 9 inches out of level, so they said they couldn't install anything in it because windows and casework and all this stuff, they wouldn't be able to level it out. And then typically with a single-family residential structure, you don't hire an MEP engineer to deal with this structure, but the contractor wouldn't deal with it at all because of the liability, particularly with the wiring, that some of the wiring was really bad and they didn't want to take the chance of having to design that system. So we had to hire MEP engineers. Anyway, next slide. Again, back to the wraparound porch. So what we did was it turns out that the owner was renting a duplex with a stair on the exterior to the second level and a tenant down below. And it turned out that that wasn't how the city of Berkeley saw this building. They thought it was a single-family residence. So, you inherit, I guess, when you buy a building, you inherit what has transpired, the history. So we had to try and bring, and I think it made it a lot better project, bring the stair inside the building and then reinstate the wraparound porch. So, next slide. So just an example of a remodel in San Francisco, if you go to the next slide, where I work with Dane Wilson, who's an interior designer, and there was a kitchen that the owner wanted to expand, and the bathroom was in the way, blocking it to the rear yard. So we moved the bathroom and then created a storage wall. It's really hard to see, but, so you want to use the mic so they can, oh. So we moved the bathroom more interior and created a storage wall as a screen wall. So the circulation changed from the bathroom blocking your access to the rear yard. And then a really subtle change was there was some pretty tall windows here that we actually turned into a French door. So the owner actually had a wedding reception here after it was built. And she said the flow of being able to access the rear yard really made a big difference in her project, in her building. And then again, another power of Revit is phasing. So she also wanted to develop her basement. So we were also, as a second phase, which we've never done, had to think ahead, do a master plan so that it would all be integrated with developing the lower level later on. So next slide. So this is sort of a before and after in the kitchen at the eating nook. And then the next slide shows the kitchen she started with and the storage wall, and then the kitchen that she had in the end. And then the next slide, the before and after in the dining room. So next slide is new construction. So again, with George, if you go to the next slide, we're, again, this whole issue in California of trying to add housing. So this site actually has a single-family residence on it that is about to be demolished. And this is in San Carlos, and then building 4 townhomes on that site. And again, this is, George's design, but I'm coordinating all the consultants for the project. The missing middle housing, as we've heard talked about. Next slide. And then my favorite project type is adaptive reuse projects. So if you go to the next slide, this was a project I did in San Leandro, which was converting an old credit union into an art gallery and event space, which is closed now. And then the next slide. Working with George, we've done a bunch of cannabis cultivation facilities. So many of you may not know, but along the 880 in Oakland, there's what they call the green belt. So there's all these warehouses that can be, if certain permitting takes place, it's a potential to convert to cannabis cultivation. So we've done like 3 projects, and it's a change of use because you're changing from a storage occupancy to actually agricultural occupancy, and you can't be near a school, and you can't have anything showing on the outside that it's cannabis, which I feel, as a energy thing is kind of terrible that you can't like put skylights in or something. So everything involves utility upgrades. And I'll just show you up here. So the structural engineers, and 2 of our projects that we did with him, he wanted to, instead of messing with the existing structure, do basically a building within a building. So the open space of the warehouse and a mezzanine, and the entry has a 2-story level. Then there's cultivation rooms, nursery. The power for these kinds of facilities is, quite extensive, especially since it's has no daylight. And then a break room, because if you've ever been in a place that is filled with cannabis, it's overwhelming in terms of it's very cloying. So anyway, so, and then this is another thing in Revit that I was just trying to show you the things Revit can do, but not that I'm, voting for it or anything. But you can do these sort of section cutaways, which I think explain the building nicely. So if you go to the next slide, this is one of the rooms that's under construction. I don't know if others have had challenges like this, but dealing with PG&E for these types of projects has been, and also with their multifamily residential projects, has been a real, challenge. Also, in this case, I know in your archive, people have talked about trying to get permits. During COVID, City of Oakland was very shorthanded in planning and fire. So I believe at one point they had 2 planners for the whole city of Oakland. So even though we paid for expedited plan check and building, there's no expedited in the planning department because there's no planners. And then in the fire department, unless the fire chief authorizes expedited, then it's very unlikely that it will happen. So many of the things talked about in the archive about how to address dealing with the city, of the governing agency in the sense of trying to get a permit came to play here. And then with the utility upgrade, dealing with PG&E, the electrical engineers had designed a system that was trying to use time in the cultivation room so that to reduce the power draw so that one grow room maybe was operating and the other one wasn't, so that they wouldn't have to increase the power so much. PG&E said no after a while. They said they wouldn't accept that, because I think there was a place, I think the electrical engineer told me in Oakland, where the transformer actually blew up on the street because of, too much power draw in the building. And then, so then we had to go to an 800 amp service, and we already knew on the poles on the street that they were maxed out. So we had to go to a vault in the sidewalk, and I've never had to deal with the Department of Transportation in Oakland, because when you do that, then you have to get a letter from them saying it's okay that you can put the vault in the sidewalk. And also, they required that you have a geotechnical boring to make sure that the water table wasn't too high, and that the composition of the soil didn't have I think it was chloride, some particular chemical in the soil. So what I'm trying to say is, when you're an architect, I'm saying this for the students, even though you might have done a similar kind of project at one point, then you come upon something like this, like, wow, I've never hired a geotechnical engineer to determine the soil composition so I could put a vault in the sidewalk. What? Oh, time? I'm almost done. Okay, we're almost done. I didn't even think that would take 10 minutes. Yes, I'm done. And the other challenge of this kind of building is, and even though we've also worked on a huge building where they also have what they call equity partners in Oakland, because they're trying to draw all the growers that are illegal out of the woodwork, so they become legal. So they're kind of subsidized for 3 years by the main lessee, the master lessee. And this particular building, and also in some of the bigger buildings, it's a very narrow, if you go back one, Sydney, it's a very narrow, thank you, a narrow building, and this is cut back a little bit, but, even though you're adding sprinklers and, the third of that diagonal, you have to separate your exits, but there is a rear door, but the rear door is landlocked, so you have to be able to get out of the building to the public way in a protected fashion. And it really represents a lot of challenges in exiting in these kind of buildings. Even though the other building we worked on was massive structure, in the end, we had to have what they call an exit passageway with absolutely no doors in it, because in terms of travel distances and common path of travel, there was no way we could get out of that building. Even though it had a rear yard, it was backed up on a railroad track, and that's not considered public way. You had to get to the street. So when you're doing a change of use, and the city has an option to make you do code upgrades, and they always do, because they have the option to do it. So, next slide. I'll keep going, I'm almost done. So this is just an example of another adaptive reuse project that we did in Pleasanton, which was an abandoned flower shop, actually, and converted it into a urgent care center. We work with a landscape architect for the perimeter landscaping. Next slide. I talked about volunteering for ACE. I think it's something that everybody might consider doing at one point. It's all over in the Bay Area. It's expanding. Right now, I'm working on the scholarship committee. So we give out scholarships to the seniors who are graduating, who are going to college, if they're going to be studying to be a contractor or architect or an engineer. And then I'm also part of the Organization of Women Architects and Design Professionals, and I plan their annual retreat every year, and Donald said that might be something people are interested in, so I'm mentioning that. So, next slide, and that's the end. Yeah.
Thank you.
So Kerstin.
Kerstin Hellman.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Kerstin, and thank you, Rachel. That was really interesting. And I did attend the retreat of the Organization of Women Architects and Design Professionals this past year, and it was fantastic. And you do an amazing job rallying everybody together, and I'm glad you got a steering committee to help. You don't have to do it all by yourself. Yeah. And then also, Rachel was so nice to share her template with me, so I was trying to make it go along with the theme of the design layout. So I have a small firm in Oakland, and I've also Donald has asked me a bunch of years to present, and I always felt I had nothing to show, and I think I'm like super scared of publicly speaking, but it got a little bit better. So I actually this year I was like, okay, I want to do it, I'm going to do it. And because I thought I would have all these new projects being photographed, and it turned out they're not finished. One was supposed to be done in June. I had a meeting on Monday, and there's still stuff missing. So things are very delayed or not ready for photography or something. But then when I put the slides together, I feel like there was enough to talk about. I didn't even put any drawings in. So can we maybe show the first slide? Okay. Yeah, so I feel like, so I do residential for the most part, pretty much exclusively. And I think of the urban fabric as the context that I work in. And I feel that residential buildings do well to fit into the context. And then can you show the next slide? That's the, so that's the Elmwood neighborhood. That's kind of typical. This is like a really positive, wonderful one. I actually used to live in a little cottage that's on the bottom right corner of the frame there. The houses are properly sized for their lots, and they have large gardens. And there are street trees, and when the sun comes out, everybody wants to be in Elmwood on that little stretch between Russell and College, and maybe down even all the way to the Claremont Avenue. So yeah, can you show the next one? And then, and I think about how we perceive space, because obviously we don't really see the city from above. And we turn around and stuff. And so there's can you go to the next image? I showed this before. This is like, when I first came to the US, I was so amazed about the landscape and everything. So this was like a little thing on a trip. I took photos of the trip from here to Yosemite and then put them on a ring, and you can kind of put it on your head and run it around your head and just kind of see what it's like. You could make one for every street or something. That's how young I was, 25 years ago or something. Next one. And then, so I tried to think of that in my projects. So like this is a kitchen that was finished, and then when you go to the right, which you can't see there, when I was trying to put this together, it's like, the photographs are always taken to just be kind of conclusive in themselves, but if I want to talk about the sequence, they don't really speak to that so well. So there's a door to the right of those rounded shelves that leads you onto this deck. Can you go to the next one? So the spaces live from that connection. This is in the same building. It's actually the space above that kitchen that we just saw. And if you're looking to the right, you can look towards you can see the handrail that's on the right image for the stairs that go down that wall. So what I like to think about during design is kind of the contraction and then the expansion of space. So really what I would like to show is from the living room, you turn, you go up that stair, and it's really narrow and it gets really tall, and then you come up and then it opens up into this space. So this is kind of the reverse, but you get the space becomes interesting when it changes in dimensions.
You take me back to my school days, because in our history of architecture class, these are the kinds of things that were talked about with respect to so many historic buildings and places.
Oh,
And it always stayed in my mind as something that architecture should do, is it should think about the sequence of the spaces, and how it changes, and how you can go from big to small, and what effect that has on you.
thanks. Okay, and then next slide. Yeah, so this is another one. So the space on the left is actually kind of a secondary entry to the building. The door you see is the bathroom, but to the right of that door is a door to the side yard. So you come into this narrow square, and then the remodeled area is you go up the stairs, and then so you're in a kind of a small space. You come into the library when you go up, and that's it's a 1.5 story tall space with these large windows opening up and you can see the Berkeley Hills on the left. And then when you turn, the stair turns and you can see up where the trellis is, you can see some tree through that's a roof deck up there. So you get, different heights and different widths of space. And then the windows respond to that in terms of, their heights. I try to have it so that you get a lot of connection to the exterior. And those, the trellis actually helps because that's a south-facing window, and they get a lot of sun. But then also it creates a really nice light pattern on the floor with the slots. The next slide. Oh, okay, so that was that. Materials. So I'm really interested in materials and how they're used. Can you show the next one? So on the left, that's a trunk, a drone. And it's so amazing to me how the finishes it's so smooth, and then the bark rolls up. It's just, I find that really intriguing. So I always think about my finishes as they lay on the structure. So the middle image is, it's a bathroom on the second floor where the roof is sloped. And then we put a skylight in, and we wrap the siding, or what's called the decking on the ceiling. It wraps down the wall and the skylight, and then the wall tile in the bathroom goes up into the skylight. So you get different effects with the light from the skylight coming down on the different materials, and it's just a really nice way of working with. I try to always use materials, if I can, like from wall to wall, or so that the wall seems to be that material. Yeah, on the right side is actually the same bathroom. Just on the other side, you can see how the limestone that encloses the shower, how that goes to the ceiling, to the sloped ceiling, and then wraps. And then there's a reveal and the drywall starts. And then the next slide. That's, yeah, so fascination with materials. That's obviously sand and what water does to it. And then I like to have, that's a driveway that was just poured in concrete, and the contractor is, the contractor was also the client, and we've worked before, and he told me that the control joints need to be like a grid. But he, I guess, humored me and let me do it like this. And because to me, it's more appealing that there's some, a rhythm in it. And it ended up cracking on the, where the joints meet like this with the dead end, then, it ended up cracking there. It still looks fine, but anyways, I like to do stuff that sometimes ends up not working out totally.
Kerstin, when do you make your material decisions? When you're doing the drawings and you're on the site?
Okay, so that's a good question because I didn't know when to talk about this. A lot of it has to do with my clients. So I work with more like collaborators if I can. So I like people that are really interested in, I like to work with people that are really interested in their projects. If they like their house and they've waited ideally they waited until it's like in really bad repair so that it feels like a good thing to remodel it at this point and then add or maybe not, just reconfigure. And then it has to do kind of with their budget. So material, it's more important how to use the material than exactly what the material is to me. And I don't really pick it necessarily early on. It happens more, with the driveway, I think we had also considered using pavers, but that's just a lot more expensive and it wasn't possible. I tried to use, pavers where the water can, I forgot what they're called, they're pavers where the water can go through or you can set them in sand. I tried to convince contractors to set them in sand instead of on a concrete, like poured concrete slab. Yeah, I don't know. Does that answer the question?
That's fine.
It's fine.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay.
It probably won't matter on the driveway cracks later on anyway when the grass grows in. Because there will always be weeds there.
Yeah, so far no weeds, but they keep really good care of their driveway. They have a beautiful garden right next to it, but I don't have.
Because we have a 100-year-old house with a 90-foot-long driveway, and it's like every inch has something growing in that crack.
Yeah. Nature comes back. Yeah. Can you go to the next one? And then I like to, that's photo of the floor folding up the wall and then turning into shelving, and then above the shelves, it's thinner and slotted and there's lights behind it. So, but I just like to think of materials in a sculptural way. Can you go to the next one? And this one it's just a bathroom, but it has these three zones. So the first zone is bamboo. You can see the vanity, but on the back of it is a pantry, a storage cabinet, skinny storage cabinet. So it's a bamboo ring, and then there's a tile ring. So the tile goes all the way up to the ceiling, both behind the toilet and on the opposite wall. And then where the shower tub is, it's all limestone. Can you go to the next slide? Oh yeah, so nest. Most of my projects have a nest in them, or they're kind of, to me it's a nest, but I think it's called prospect refuge in like psychological terms. Can you go to the next slide? So yeah, that's obviously a nest in a tree, and you can kind of see that it provides some refuge in terms of coziness, and you have a view out onto the surroundings, so which is protection as well as kind of claiming the area. Can you go to the next one? I think I might run out of slides and we can talk. Something happened that the text is a little covered up. So here, this is on MLK. You can see the nest is up top on the right side of the building. And when you're inside the nest, that's what you see. It's this roof deck, which was the whole impetus for the project, was the clients wanted a roof deck to entertain from. And you can see there's this roll-up door in the back has a dumbwaiter in it. So it has a little refrigerator or storage. Dumbwaiter is that thing in the middle You slide the doors open, and then there's a rope system. You can get the food from the kitchen below by manual. Those are actually not that expensive when they're manual. As soon as you go on the right side, you see the right photo. The yellow is all the stucco, and then this yellow box that sticks out a little bit, and it has a roll-up door that's pulled open, and there's a mahogany shelving to the right. Yeah, so this is mahogany built in, and in the middle of that, it looks a little funny with these vertical sliding doors that open up, and that's where the dumbwaiter is. Yeah, but the main thing is you sit on this roof deck and you cannot really see it so much from the street. When I did this, I was thinking about, everybody wants like minimal railings and all this stuff, and I thought it's gonna be not that great. So the wall is 30 inches high, and can you go to the next slide? And then I put the railing on top so that when you sit, you can look out, but the bottom part of your body is protected because we get cold winds here, and you feel kind of held. And yeah, so this is just kind of a setting from the photographer, but they have 15 people on the deck, and everybody sits on the steps or whatever. And you can see the city at night. Can you go to the next slide? And this is in Larkspur, and it's kind of dark. So here the nest is, well, there's several nests. One is the office above the awning, you can see, but I don't have photos of that. When you're up there, you can look over your property. But also the deck on the left side of the building there, which is you're inside the deck when you're on the right photograph. It gives you kind of a feeling of being held. And then in this case, the garden is up from there. And maybe I'll just tell a little story because I think I'm gonna run out of stuff to say. This was one of my first projects, and I was very lucky. So I got to the project site. The landscape architect actually moved back to Europe before the construction started. So I did the CA for the landscape also. And they started building the gabion walls, but they didn't do a layout. So I had to tell them, they're like, they're just building them. It's like, you got to lay them out. Like, how do you know? This doesn't look like it's going to work. So that was difficult. And then I got to the site when they had formed the stair for the pour, and I had to make use of what I learned in architecture school, like undergrad construction class, construction detailing, that your concrete pour is, the finished product of any pour is, if you're lucky, as good as your form, but it's never better. And I got there and they had built the stair form out of 2 pieces the long way. So the stringers were too short and they added another piece of stringer onto it. And then I said, well, how are you gonna do that? And he said, well, we'll finish that after, we'll finish it when it's poured. And so I was like, that was like my first larger project. Luckily, the contractor who was doing the building construction had told me, that I should look at the form. So I knew that I wasn't the only person thinking this was weird. So I had to tell them that they needed to redo the form.
Was this the subs work on the contract, or was this the contractor?
Well, no, the general contractor was for the building side, and the landscape part was landscape contractor, and they did the form themselves. They weren't really under the main sub, but the main sub, it was one of those, the main general contractor felt that in the end, everything falls back on him, whether or not he's paid to supervise them, which was good for me because I got to learn something. So they were not very happy with me. They were very disgruntled. And but I learned that you don't have to yell at people. You can just say, I can't accept it, I'm sorry. And then they had to redo it. So that was a really good lesson. So they redid it and the stair turned out beautiful. Next one. Yeah, so this is another nest. So there is this is kind of 2 levels. When you're up in that space, you get to see the large doors that lead out onto the balcony that you see on the left. So there's the balcony up high that cantilevers out from the building. The deck below we've seen before, that was outside of that kitchen on the first images. That's, the deck sits on the ground on these posts. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to say about the building, but this is on MLK.
This is in Berkeley, okay.
Yeah, it's in Berkeley, yeah. You can see it from the street. It's not the most appealing building from the street because it was by the previous owner had, it was one of those typical, I know they're called bungalows. They have, you know, it's a 1-story building with a slanted roof and it has a little dormer on the front. You see them everywhere here and probably was shingled. And then, or no, it had wood siding. And then someone bought it and raised it up. And then they put in a stair in kind of a diagonal stair because trying to minimize, you know, the impact on the space. It became a kind of an awkward building. It looks kind of tall and the entry stairs go up really high up. But it's between Vine and Cedar on the uphill side of the street, and it has this very, very red stucco, so you can easily see it, but I'm not responsible for that street view. And then we added in the back, so what you see in metal, clad in metal, it's clad in metal because they get a huge sun exposure and they have a really hard time keeping up the siding on the building. So we did that, so it's kind of like a beetle that sits on top of and then it turned out there was no waterproofing in the facades. It was just, yeah, so we had we couldn't install windows. So we ended up having to take the redwood siding off, which it wasn't in great shape, but it was kind of a bummer. But someone came and took a bunch of siding off and reused it, which was great. And then we could actually waterproof and shear the building, and then they ended up using stucco for the front. Okay, let's go to the next one.
So, the scope, was it like originally already a 2-story building and
We added a 3rd story.
as a first?
Yeah, can you go back
So
a
the
second,
whole for this
Sydney?
building is brand
Yeah, the 3rd floor with the balcony, this is all new. The 2nd floor below was there, and we did the kitchen in the back, and then in the front, we remodeled everything and in the original style, and we added redwood paneling. Actually, it ended up being fir paneling because you couldn't get the kind of redwood. And the lower floor has all the bedrooms. That's how it was. Yeah.
So what's the span of the floors?
Floor to ceiling here.
Yeah, like the between the space. Do you use like steel at all? Or
There is a bent steel frame in there, which so there's bent steel. So it's, I guess you could call it a moment frame that creates that triangle. And then there's a wind brace between the upper windows and the sliding door. There's a wind brace that connects the left and right for stability. We could have done this without that, but it would have, this is Lowen, who they fabricate that, they make a system, I forgot what it's called, where it's self-contained and you can build this without any structure in the middle, but it would have been twice as much. But I have to say, the steel frame ended up costing a bunch of money too, so it might have been the same amount. Yeah, so maybe we would have given the money to Lowen instead of the steel fabricator and the structural engineer. I don't know. One thing maybe to say about the balcony is you can see that the wall cantilevers out from the back building. And so originally I had the framing running towards the balcony, but I don't know if you all heard about the balconies collapsing in Berkeley with the students on them. So I was really concerned about that, having the framing traverse the facade. And so I ended up, what I did is there are two 14 or 16-inch tall engineered beams that run in the facade and cantilever out. And then the deck framing, the balcony framing actually runs the long way. It runs the 20 feet from left to right to support the deck. And that's also why in the photo you can see that the decking runs the short way. It's because the framing runs the long way. It's kind of not how you would normally do it, but that was the reason for that. Yeah, I wanted to make sure, and then, so that means the structure is now fully wrapped in those exterior walls. I did have not a good incident where I spent an hour with a plumber and the contractor talking about where they can run the plumbing vent in that wall, the wall behind that plant there. And I told him he can run it in that wall, no problem. Anywhere he wants to run it in that wall is fine. And despite all my efforts, he decided to run it in the wall to the left of the plant, which is the one where the cantilever beam is. And he cut into the beam at the top, which when I got there, I was like, I can't believe it, like a huge hole in the top of the cantilever. And then talked to the contractor and he's like, well, it's no big deal. It's at the top, so it doesn't really matter. But, you know, it's not in the bottom of the beam. And I was like, it's a cantilever. It's the opposite. You know, it was really shocking because the contractor was actually also an architect. So you never know what, so, you know, when you think I always tend to think the other people know a lot more than me, but you gotta go with your gut sometime, or, you know, just don't be shy. And yeah, so, and I try not to look dumb, because I'm kind of worried that maybe I say the wrong thing or whatever, but.
Did you make them redo that beam?
Well, they ended up putting a steel plate on the outside of the building, it's like a 1/4 inch thick plate, and then bolted to the face of that's the only thing we could do. And then we had to run the facade. You can't see it. But that happened, yeah. But yeah, so plumbers, they're notorious for this stuff. But I thought I did a good job talking to him, but it doesn't matter. It didn't help.
I have a standard detail on all my drawings. It shows where you can run a pipe.
Oh yeah, the details are on there, and the structural engineer has them on there, but they don't look at it. Or what?
Were the owners aware of what happened?
Well, yeah, but you know, I don't want to be, you know, what I care about is that it gets fixed. You know? It doesn't help anyone to get nervous, you know, the owners are best helped with feeling confident about their contractor, you know. Yeah.
Question on the balcony of the deck where I like the Y-shaped posts. Was that done because there were obstructions or to keep the view from the glass below? In other words, the vertical posts, it looks to me with cross bracing supporting the balcony at the lower level. Am I reading?
Oh, yeah, those were existing, believe it or not. Yeah, so there was an existing, yeah, there was an existing deck, and we preserved the posts and the braces. We just we had to add a new beam on top because the previous deck was actually dropped. So when you came out of the kitchen, you had to step down. So because we raised it, we could set the new beam over the existing structure and preserve that, and then we just framed the new deck in. Yeah, yeah. Now I gotta actually move forward. Can we move to the next one? Yeah. Yeah, just more nests. So that's, you know, that's the kitchen on the left where you see the big door leading out onto the deck. And then this is like two families owned this building together. And, oh, I should have put a before photo in it for this one, but anyways, we were able to create a little nest for the upper unit up top. It's really like a crow's nest, and then the lower is it's a little more enclosed. The nest on the lower level, but it looks a little bit like Greece to me with all the white plaster and the blue sky. But that turned out really beautifully. And the nest up top is cantilevered. So you can see the steel under there. So this was really on a budget. So you can't see, but it's just exposed pressure treated lumber from the below, and we had to keep it open, you know, to other, you get in a whole new level of complications when you try to enclose this, so it's drip through. And then we used, I think it's ePay or whatever it was at the time, you know, it keeps changing what's available. Can you go to the next slide? Can you go to what? Next one? It's still the same? It's stuck. Oh. Oh.
First, one thing that sets you apart from, I think, everybody else in this room, if I understand correctly, you actually were born overseas and went to school overseas, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what got you into, when did you get caught on architecture? And are you surprised at how you went with it?
I am surprised because where I grew up, you kind of pick a profession when you come out of, when you graduate from high school, and you kind of stick with it. That kind of was the thing, and I was totally scared because up to high school, it feels like the perspective keeps expanding. And then I thought, now I have to pick one of those things. And we had a book, and it starts with A, and architecture was the first thing. And I was like, oh, maybe that works. So, you know, and I looked at it, and it had a bunch of things that I was interested in. And I was also interested in literature, but my stepsister had already done that, and so I felt like that would be competing. And yeah, and then there was art, and that seemed too scary. So I did that. I studied that in Germany, and then I came here, and things are totally different here in terms of how structures work. I remember in the beginning, I thought, man, these students, they're all. I went to UC Berkeley for urban design, and that's how I came. And they were all drawing these skinny walls, and that's what. When we grew up, I mean, when I was studying, you know, that was like first year architecture. Students draw these skinny walls, but they're this fat in Germany, you know. And I thought they all hadn't learned that yet here, until I realized the walls are actually so skinny here. Okay, so I guess another topic was indoor-outdoor. It's gonna be quick now. Yeah, this is kind of the extreme. If I can, I like the bathroom to be indoor-outdoor. And sometimes people go for it, so this worked. Can you go to the next? You know, we missed.
You can go through the shower?
Can you go one back and one more back? Can you go one more back? Huh, I'm missing something. Okay. Can you go one more back now? Yeah, what did you say about the?
Do you have a door that you can go through the shower?
Yeah.
To the outside?
Yeah, you see, this is the same shower. One's from the inside, once you look through the interior door, and one you look through the exterior door. Yeah, and then this way, you know, then I say, well, you can wash your dog in the shower, and then people get more interested of having the direct connection. You know? Yeah, you can wash your children. You can close the door if you don't like it, you know. Yeah, can you go to the next one? Thanks. Yeah, that one is indoor outdoor, but it's a kitchen. So like, it really helps to have that window go all the way to the floor.
I studied in Copenhagen
Uh-huh.
back in 2000, and my dorm was just like had a window that, for the most part, it looked like it was a door, but it looked like a window. And every single palladium, you could just exit right out your window door, you know, but it looked exactly like that.
It's cool, right? Yeah, it's so nice when you have the opportunity to have that connection. Can you go to the next one? Yeah, we've seen this project before. So that's from the bedroom, connecting from the bedroom, and from this hall. And can you go to the next one? Light. Oh yeah, that's quick. Can you go to the next? Yeah. So I like to have, when I can, to bring light in a way that you can become aware of it. So like there, because of the atmosphere, you can see the beam, you know, it's not just bright somewhere and you get glare, but you can get this reflection, kind of, what is that called? Like, it creates some ambient light, and the materiality becomes also more clear. Can you go to the next one? So photos are not that great, but so the two on the left are wall washing skylights. I think I took those myself, so professional photographer can do a much better job. But it really helps for the wall to be lit, because otherwise skylights look like a bright spot in a dark surface. And then on the right side, we didn't have, there's no skylight, but it's actually, I think, a fluorescent light on the ledge, and then it shines against the ceiling, so you get that same wall washing effect. Can you go to the next one?
And those skylights just going into like a typical kitchen room or?
Yeah.
So do those skylights have a special lens, or it's just a regular skylight?
Any kind of skylight, yeah. The only thing is to have a wall that goes into the shaft, and then you just have to just talk to the contractor to make sure they can frame it so that there's this continuity, and then it just gives this nice effect of the washing. Oh, and then just, for a few semesters I was teaching materials and methods at USF, and that's my last class there, happy kids. And we did a couple of summer weekends. Those are my co-teachers on the left. And we developed the curriculum by trying the exercises we had them do ourselves because it really was important, because otherwise, it sounds easy, but sometimes, people run into problems doing the stuff that they're supposed to do. But I found that when I'm retired, I'll teach again, but right now I feel like I can't handle it. It takes up so much time. Can you go to the next one? Oh yeah, and that's it. So when I first started being self-employed, I started this once a month going out with friends for a beer, and that was in 2009. And so by now this has grown into like an online help forum. And we recently, a year or so ago, we went on groups.io. So it's public, anybody can join if you want to join it. People talk about all kinds of problems with jurisdictions, with codes, with details, technical stuff, referrals, like anything. And then last year we started like a carbon conscience study group to work on, learning about a net zero construction, which is, it's always hard to, when you're working, to pick up a new, change your whole, how you work and implement new stuff, it's part of learning and staying kind of up to snuff. And this last week or so, we came up with a calendar for this year for what we're going to talk about, and individual people will prepare the sessions. So anyone can join the carbon conscious study also. And I think that's it, right? Yep, thank you.
Anybody else have any questions?
We can.
Very nice, Kerstin.
Thanks.
I see one of the slides when you talk about the sculpture. There's one that says the sculpture with a little change, and then with the lights. What's the purpose of that structure?
Oh, this lot.
Yeah, I think in your slide when you talk about the sculpture, there's one that like a wooden space, and then there's another glass.
Yeah, it's actually that was a workout space for what are those people called that work? They trade. If they live on the West Coast, they have to get up to start working when the stock market opens on the East Coast. And so we created that light theme so that he could get up and the light would slowly increase, so he could create his own sunrise and work out before he got ready to work. So that space ended up having a bike in it and I don't know if it had a treadmill. It had a yoga workout stuff, like a rope wall and a treadmill and a bike racing stuff. That's what that space was for.
Do you like hire professional carpenters or is prefab material?
Actually, that was finished carpentry. So it was flooring installer, and then I think we might have had, I don't remember if we had metal ledges for the wooden shelves. Then they were wrapped in the wooden material. And then they just used LED strip and a diffuser so that you don't see the bright lights. Yeah.
That's the one with the wooden slats? It's funny because it looks like it has a window behind it, that the light is like there's green or something beyond it, but no, it's not.
No, that was just
Wow.
it's just LED lights behind it.
Is there some part of your work nowadays that is more frustrating than other parts of the work?
The most frustrating is when I make a mistake. So I can tell you one, and Kurt knows this one really well. I did something where a project, and I was hoping this would be photographed, but it's not. Was a residential it's a 2-story building. We added to the 2nd story and a little bit to the 1st story, and we dug out a basement. They wanted a root cellar. They actually called it a root cellar. And then a roof deck. And so in order to connect the 4 levels, so root cellar, main floor, upper floor, and roof deck, we needed a stair, and the easiest way to do it was an exterior stair. We tried the interior, but that would have caused you to have a bump at the building to, for the stair to exit out of. So we did a spiral stair, and if you have tried to, spiral stairs are generally prefabricated, and so they're made by people who work very differently from architects, I guess. We couldn't get any details about it, so we couldn't show that it structurally worked, and we finally needed to get a permit, and so we decided to do a deferred submittal for the spiral stair. And in the process of the project, I totally lost track of this. I didn't remember that also the architecture of the stair wasn't fully approved because it was under deferred submittal. And when it came down and the structural engineer finally designed the stair themselves and said that it was built according to this, it came down to the structural plan checker saying that the landings of the stair didn't meet the code. And so I spent 6 months learning about how these landings meet the code. And I finally figured out how they meet the code with a lot of help. Kurt being one of them. I needed a lot of talking to, and one more step. Finally, I met with a plan checker, and luckily, someone helped me find in the International Code Council publishes code interpretations, and there's an interpretation that explains how explains an equivalency, an area equivalency for spiral stair landings that applies. So I was able to show that a spiral stair landing can work if the landing is the size of 2 treads, not 3. Because when you just read the code, cursory or whatever you call it, it sounds like you have to have a 1/4 circle for a landing. You just need an equivalent of that. So it was very difficult when I make the mistake. When someone else makes a mistake, that's also hard because then I have to tell them in a way that something isn't wrong that makes them want to, repair it or change it. That's also hard. And another thing is I have been very afraid of having to work in Oakland. And what I found is when something, like I hadn't done a project there in a long time, and I hadn't heard anything positive about dealing with Oakland planning and building. And as a result, I didn't contact them as early as I should have, and I waited, and it turned out that I created the exact situation I was afraid of, which was I submitted not in the proper way, whatever. But eventually I realized my mistake, and I can now, if anybody needs to talk to someone, I found a planner, 2 people in planning that actually respond to you and will give you a paper trail and help you make the project move forward. So those are the things that are most frustrating.
One of my colleagues from grad school, actually, who was a really good planner in San Francisco, is now the permit ombudsman for the city of Oakland. Yeah, so his job is actually to clean up the permitting for the city of Oakland, which is like a Herculean task, but Robin is great, and so hopefully
I need your phone number.
Yeah, and he, it's interesting because there's, I don't know if you guys all know, but there's the Oakland Builders Alliance, OBA. And last year, yeah, I think, no, maybe it was 2023, we had Permits and Pancakes event. And we actually, our group got all of the people in the city of Oakland that deal with permitting, like every department had a person there. And they all came to talk about what they were going to do to fix their permitting problems. But we need a follow-up one to say, like, okay, what's your grade on your homework, you know? Like, how did it, you know, get better? But it was actually a really good sign, you know, that we had this event and that, you know, everybody that deals with permitting was there in one room talking about how to fix permitting. Because at least, you know, they're recognizing that it's a problem, you know?
That's good. It's the first step, right? You gotta accept that there's a problem. Then
Right.
you can do something about it. If you're still pretending there isn't one, nothing's gonna happen.
Well, and Oakland has major problems right now anyway with our whole mayoral recall and our city attorney recall, and the fact that we don't either have strong city council government or strong mayor government. It's like crap hybrid government. So our city,
time to get back at the fire departments too.
yeah, our city charter needs to get updated.
One thing I found in Oakland and also in San Francisco that's been invaluable is the engineer of the day. And
Oh, yeah.
that is just, they're so responsive, especially when you're dealing with existing conditions.
Is that at the counter?
Now, well, it was at the counter, but you can also email them. And they've been incredibly helpful doing
And
that
they respond quickly.
immediately.
Okay.
Yeah,
In Oakland?
in Oakland.
Oh, I didn't
Yeah.
find out from you.
Yeah.
I need to get that email address.
Yeah.
Do you have it? I have it. I mean, you just make sure you put in the subject line, EOD, Engineer of the Day, and they literally write back, it seems like in 5 minutes.
Is it the like info at building permit kind of?
Yeah, I have it. I don't know
Okay.
off the top of my head,
Maybe
but,
later we can send it.
but that I find really useful, especially dealing with
If
existing
you
buildings.
get that to me, then when I send out the next reminder announcement for the next program, I'll include it.
Okay.
Very good.
Yeah, and technical services in San Francisco, you can go, you know, their new spot there is pretty amazing.
Oh,
you
yeah.
know, going to all the different counters, but they have technical services that's there in the morning, and they're so helpful. I mean, they are the plan checkers, but you can also email them. So when you're dealing with, you know, things that you're not sure how to resolve, I found them invaluable. And the planning department there too. I'm surprised Robin left, because I've met with Robin.
Right?
That's great.
Some people think that open staff needs to go RTO, which is return to office.
Yeah, totally.
Totally.
100%.
Well, just the Russian roulette of trying to get an appointment. I mean, on your archive, sometimes it's posted.
Do you remember the old days when you go up in that room where they had the builders, the planners, the engineers, the civil people, and
And it felt like a nightmare then, but I would trade that nightmare for this one.
but you always got to talk to people.
I know.
Exactly.
Right.
We appreciate it.
Right.
Yeah. I really think the staff in Oakland's very helpful, but the process the past few years is just so hard to explain to a client, like, why this is taking so long. Like, you have no control. All you can do is badger.
Right.
Which it doesn't help either, but, you know, the squeaky wheel or whatever, but,
Yeah.
well, the glories of architecture.
Yeah. We're at our time, if anybody
Yeah.
needs to move on.
Yeah. Well, thank you all.
Thank you.
Excellent presentation.
Excellent.